Right, good evening, everyone. It's a nice full house tonight, so we'll hopefully have a lot of fun and entertainment. May I ask if anyone wants to speak, please use their microphone. We're obviously being broadcast live here. And if you could start, I suppose, just obviously introduce yourself when you are speaking. So, first order of the day. We are short of a vice chair at the moment, so I'm looking for nominations for a vice chair. Is there anyone wants to propose?
I'm Councillor Nichols. I'd like to propose Councillor Walkham for the role of Vice Chair.
Councillor Walkham.
Yes.
Thank you. Anyone want to second?
Councillor Hart, I'd like to second that proposal.
Thank you very much. Can we have, is there anyone else at all? No? Could we have a show of hands, please? Those in favour, raise your hands. Those against? And those abstaining? Thank you very much. Then it is carried. So apologies. We do have an apology of sorts.
We had an apology from Councillor Walkham. I've just had information that he may be arriving a little bit late.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much. Right. Minutes of the 16th of March. So members, we have before us minutes from the subcommittee meeting held on the 16th of March 2023. Are members content for me as chairman to sign these minutes? Can I have a proposer, please? No.
So we're in the position where the minutes of the last two meetings, we have no members who were at those meetings now on the committee. I've taken some advice from the monitoring officer and he is happy for us to get the chairman to sign those minutes off as a true record. Chairman has watched the webcast of those two meetings.
Thank you. We have a proposer for me, please.
Councillor Nichols, I propose you.
Thank you very much. Second. Thank you very much. So we take it to vote. So those for, please show of hands. Those against? And those abstaining? Thank you. Thank you very much. We therefore go on to the next item, the minutes of the 12th of April 2023. So before us we have the minutes from the meeting held on the 12th of April 2023. Are members content for me as chairman to sign these minutes? Can I have a proposer, please?
I'll propose you sign the minutes.
Thank you, Councillor Nichols. Second.
And I second that motion, Councillor Hart.
Thank you. Then can we have a vote, please? Those for? Those against? And those abstaining? Thank you very much. Then that is carried. Right, so I've got a quick slot for me, just to welcome everyone here. I want to thank everyone, obviously, for coming here. It's a great privilege. And I want to obviously thank previous officers, or the current officers, for their hard work. And I also want to thank the previous administration for undertaking these meetings over the many years that these have been running. I would like to say that also that I've never done this before, and so it may be different from previous meetings. So I do apologise if there's any if I miss anything for this meeting. I won't do it again. Okay, so thank you anyway. So we are now looking at declaration of interest. Are there any declarations of interest for tonight's agenda? None. Thank you. And now we come to the next item, which is about training, the role of the Audit and Governance Committee. And I think Stephen Lynette is delivering this one. So I do thank you, Stephen.
Thank you, Chairman. You might want to reserve your thanks.
Oh, okay.
You might not be thanking me when I finish. I'll just wait for the presentation to come up, Chairman. So the role of the Audit and Governance Committee. So for your first training session members, why you're here, what this committee is about. So next slide, please, Stephen. So what's an audit committee? So this is the definition by the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy. So the purpose of an audit committee is to provide an independent assurance on the adequacy of the risk management framework, the associated control environment, independent scrutiny of the authority's financial and non-financial performance to the extent that it affects the authority's exposure to risk and weakens the control environment, and to oversee the financial reporting process. So there's quite a lot of words in there about what the purpose of an audit committee is, and I'll break those down a little bit for you in a minute. And next slide, please, Stephen. And the next one is why have an audit committee? So the reasons to have an audit committee are it raises greater awareness of the need for internal control and the implementation of audit recommendations throughout the organisation. It increases public confidence in the objectivity and fairness of our financial and other reporting, reinforces the importance and independence of internal and external audit and any other similar review processes, for example, providing a view on the annual governance statement. It provides additional assurance through a process of independence and objective review. So this committee is very, very important. It's quite a powerful committee because you report directly to council. You are carrying out on behalf of council some important things like the approval of the statement of accounts. You are the interface between the council and its internal and external auditors. Next slide, please, Stephen. And if I could break down the committee's remit into a diagram, because we all like diagrams. The audit committee is therefore covering the financial reporting, the risk and internal control, internal audit, external audit, and governance and compliance. So that's basically in the diagrammatical form. The remit of the committee is quite a lot of words, I'm afraid. So next slide, please, Stephen. So this is what's in the Constitution as your remit, which is approving the statement of accounts. Now, when you approve the statement of accounts, you are not expected to have checked every figure in those accounts. You're expected to build on all the assurances that you've had during the year that the systems are working, etc. You consider the effectiveness of the council's risk management arrangements, the control environment, and associated anti-fraud and anti-corruption arrangements. The risk management register that you receive is the corporate risk register, and that's about those risks that will blow the council off course in delivering its corporate plan. Seek assurances that action is being taken on risk-related issues identified by auditors and inspectors. Be satisfied that our assurance statements, including the annual governance statement, properly reflects the risk environment and any actions required to improve it. You approve internal audit strategy, its plan, and monitor its performance. Next slide, please, Stephen. You're approving the shared anti-fraud service strategy, its plan, and monitor its performance. You see summary internal audit reports during the course of the year, and during the course of committee, Simon Martin from the Shared Internal Audit Service will update you on work on the shared internal audit plan. And you're seeking assurance that action is being taken where necessary on those. Where there are high-level risk recommendations on audit reports, Simon will keep reporting back until that management has dealt with those risks. You receive an annual report from the head of internal audit. There he's giving you an assurance statement that the systems that we have in the council are going to produce a statement of accounts that has figures you can rely on. He'll also do a review of internal audit and its effectiveness every year. You receive and consider reports of external audits, including the annual audit letter and inspection agencies when they were them, potentially coming back, and monitor management action in response to the issues raised. And you're responsible for ensuring there are effective relationships between external and internal audit and other relevant bodies, and the value of the audit process is actively promoted. So, review the financial statements, external auditor's opinion and reports to members, and monitor management action in response to issues raised by external audit. Oversight of the council's commercial projects, budget monitoring reports and risk management reports throughout the year, and you lead the cross-member scrutiny and consideration of the council's draft annual budget and medium-term financial plan. Where appropriate, assisting the council and the executive in development of its budget and policy framework by in-depth analysis of financial, procurement and governance related issues, and where relevant to the audit of finance functions of the committee, overseeing and scrutinising all internal corporate and governance functions of the council. A bit of a word salad there, I'm afraid, but to go to the next slide, I'll show you how the reports that you get actually help you with that. So in relation to internal audit, you receive an internal audit activity and performance reports during the course of the year. These will include summary information regarding individual audit reviews and details of progress on implementing key recommendations. Annually, you receive the internal audit annual assurance report, which includes the review of the effectiveness of internal audit and Simon's annual opinion on governance, risk management, and internal control. You'll see every quarter the annual risk management, the corporate risk register report, and annually you will review our risk management policy. Governance, you will receive the annual governance statement, which is a rip-roaring 32-page read. You get updates on the council's compliance with Data Protection and Freedom of Information Act requirements, and internal audit's annual assurance report includes the annual review of the effectiveness of internal audit, which leads towards that governance work. Next slide, please, Stephen. You'll also have the approval of the internal audit plan. As I say, each committee cycle, you will receive an internal audit activity and performance report, and you get that annual insurance report. In terms of external audit, you get their audit planning report, their audit results report, their audit annual report, and every 5 years, you will be responsible for recommending to council how external audit is procured. For the last 2 rounds, we have been part of Public Sector Audit Appointments Limited, which is a wholly owned company of the LGA. 99% of local government procures its audits through that joint arrangement. And so you'll receive that recommendation every 5 years. In terms of financial reporting, every quarter you get budget forecast to year-end reports. You'll see the annual statement of accounts, and the audit planning report and audit results report of the external auditor also assist with that particular part of your remit. Next slide, please. Treasury management, annual investment strategy, capital strategy and minimum revenue provision policy will come here for scrutiny before it goes on to executive to recommend to full council. You receive a Treasury Management half-year update report and the Treasury Management annual report so that you can check back against the annual investment strategy that what we said we would do. Our shared anti-fraud service will bring you a shared anti-fraud service plan for the year, and you'll also receive updates from the shared anti-fraud service on their activity against that report. And finally, on budget scrutiny, you get the budget and medium-term financial plan update report around November. Budget medium-term financial plan for scrutiny, along with the capital strategy, minimum revenue provision policy, and the annual investment strategy, which always makes for an interesting January meeting when we go through that scrutiny process. Next slide, please, Stephen. So what makes a good audit committee? So that's, and these are generally what's there out there from the Chartered Institutes of Accountants, etc. So it's a chair and membership that's knowledge, experience and interest in the field. So it's really great that you're all here and interested in audit and finance and governance. The committee will also benefit from members with financial awareness. Unbiased attitudes, treating auditors, the executive and management equally, and the ability to challenge the executive or management when required. And the membership is balanced, objective, independent of mind and knowledgeable, which I'm sure you all are. Some top tips on what makes a good audit committee. First of all, there is no such thing as the stupid question. If you're thinking, I don't know what that means, there are other people in the room thinking they don't know what they mean. And I sometimes sit here and think, I don't know what you mean. So there's no such thing as a stupid question, so please do ask it. Meetings should have a free and open discussion by all members without political influences being displayed. Please don't be adversarial. Don't ask who is to blame, ask how do you make sure this doesn't happen again. Have an intellectual curiosity and a professional skepticism when you're looking at reports and receiving presentations, etc. And please be wary of detail and creep. Concentrate on assurances systems are working and on the policies and the frameworks that we have in place. If you go into the detail, you will lose your way in the rabbit hole. I'll take any questions through you, Chair.
Oh, thank you very much, Stephen, for that. So it's really about questions or comments from the councillors, whether this is exactly what you thought you was coming here for. Any questions, observations?
Councillor Hart, would just like to thank Steve for his excellent presentation that made it all very clear.
Thank you. So was that easy? Is that a stupid question?
That was your introduction, Councillor. I mean, we will, as you see in the work programme at the last item on the agenda, it'll fit with this, and you'll see in the work programme of the next committee. There's also asking for members training on that, so we put some suggested training in there. But if members want to juggle around with training, then please do say.
Yep.
And we'll accommodate that. If members want extra training, we'll also try to accommodate that too.
Thank you. Excellent. So next point, Councillor Hopewell. We want you to come and give us some information about the annual leisure contract performance report 2023.
Thank you. As members will be aware, we are now in our 4th year of our 15-year contract with our leisure operator, Everyone Active. I would like to introduce Dan Humphreys, the contract manager from Everyone Active, who will present an update on the annual reports. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. My name's Dan. I am the contract manager for Everyone Active in East Herts, and I have quite a lot of slides and quite a lot of information to get through. But I will do my best to get as much as I can out today. And if there's questions at the end, I'm happy to take questions from there. So we've summarised in terms of what we've achieved in the calendar year 2022. Essentially, we've had a very good year in terms of participation. We've seen total participation increase to over 1.3 million, which is up by 110%. Swimming has increased. Last year, we saw Hart and Pool reopen. I have some images that will show you the impact of the work that's taken place there. This is a bit of a summary in terms of bits and pieces of there, so I shall go through that as we go along. There's a general overview in terms of what we've achieved in the last 12 months in that 2022 period. The changing rooms of the dry side have opened up as part of the Harton development. We've refreshed the Harton gym kit. We've also introduced different programs at Grange Paddocks, from table tennis kids programs to just diversify what we do. Obviously, this time last year, Harton Pool reopened. We have launched our Parkinson's program, which I'll talk about when we go through that process. And we've various investments in terms of the Splash Lagoon at Grange Paddocks. We participated in the Herts County Council scheme, It's Never Too Late campaign, where we were pipped, unfortunately, by Hemel Hempstead for the most people that were referred to in the county, by about 30 referrals. We've also done a water safety campaign in terms of respecting the water over last summer, and we're continuing to do that again this year. At the back end of 2022, we saw the Grange Paddocks 3G pitch open. We've also launched a brand new inflatable session at Grange Paddocks and linked in with Grove Cottage with their Santa Run. Just as an overview in some of the things that we've got, and I won't dwell on some of those things, but it will give you an overview in terms of things that we've done. So you've got what we've done in April, our Parkinson's program. As part of our corporate health and wellbeing strategy, we've teamed up with Parkinson's UK, and we offer free memberships to people suffering with Parkinson's in East Herts. I believe that we have 170 people having free access to that across the contract, and we've developed quite a healthy scheme there that benefits the community in terms of them getting free access, meeting like-minded people that are suffering from the same condition. It also gives them a bit of a respite in terms of other partners coming in, and it's been a very useful thing, to the point that we now give them the community room every month, and they have a very raucous lunch club that they have every month. We've also diversified in terms of the Splash Lagoon. So when we first opened Grange Paddocks, there was a Splash Lagoon in there. We've managed to fund and add in, I realise that I'm not clicking at the same point that I'm scrolling on my screen, apologies. As you can see at the top, we've invested in some lighting and some fun shapes that go across the splash lagoon. This has really started to help bring young adults into the pool. When I say young adults, most of them are under the age of 5. A little bit about our Respect the Water campaign around water safety, and the Never Too Late campaign. And then again in Q4, we've obviously got the launch of the Grange Paddocks, the 3G pitch, which is very well attended. Also, it would have been our first birthday, so we tied that in with a freestyle footballer coming down to help launch the site, and along with the Santa Dash, which is something that we do as an annual thing in partnership with Grove Cottage. From a more analytical perspective, from a total participation level, as Councillor Hopewell pointed out, we're in the 4th year of our contract. Obviously, COVID has not been kind. What I've done is include some ideas so you get an understanding of the impact of the investment in the leisure facilities in relation to how many more people are coming compared to when Everyone Active first took the contract on in 2010. Ultimately, we are seeing a lot more people coming into the contract, which is a positive thing. There's then a breakdown in terms of by demographic. I won't necessarily pretend to go through that in any real depth. It is all positive in relation to what we've seen over the last 12 months, certainly in 2022. There are a few elements that we're starting to see come back this year around the more mature user. What we've seen is that obviously some delays around the Harton project has brought more people back in, and we've now got more programs in terms of lighter activities just to encourage people that might not want to come to HIT classes or do lots of high impact work. From a swimming perspective, we've really seen a massive impact in terms of new Grange Paddocks. You can see from the graphs that I've got, participation levels are through the roof. Typically, we do see that over the summer periods with the holiday programs, that participation does increase exponentially. Obviously, from May 2022, Harton Pool came back into those figures, so you get a real sense in terms of what you're looking at from a year-on-year perspective. But we've seen 149% more swimmers than what we did in the previous year. From a breakdown in terms of what we've got, we're seeing more under 16s come in. That's up by over 200%, massively helped by the fact that some of the images that we've got at Harton, the lessons that we've learned from Grange Paddocks, we've now made that environment a lot more family friendly. I must admit, we've put on the windows at Harton, as you come around on the learner pool, like an aquatics theme, like it's an underwater theme. Sadly, every Monday it takes me 10 minutes to get my child from the car park into the lessons because he wants to touch every fish. I need to find another way in so that I can get in and get changed quickly. From a 60+ swimmer perspective, we have seen that number not necessarily increase to the same level that we have done with some of the other age demographics, but we are seeing that increase this year in 2023, and we're confident that that's going to grow and continue to get back to the same levels that it would have done pre-COVID. From a fitness perspective, we break it down in terms of total fitness, which is people coming to gym and going to classes. Essentially, last year we saw an increase of 202,829 more visits. As a context, historically, our best year in the previous contract was 369,000 visits. So it gives you a real gauge in terms of we were actually seeing a best part of another 85,000 visits come into there. Group exercise is something that we haven't necessarily seen come back into the same level. We are massively keen when Harton has the extension that will be opening up later this year to see that. The images that you've got there are the investment that we've put into Harton with the new CV kit and the new strength kit. And again, some of those numbers just talk about that over time. So it gives you a perception in terms of the investment that you've put into Grange Paddocks of how that's making a significant difference to the number of people that are participating in fitness activities. The bit that I mentioned around group exercise, at the moment, we're just waiting for that Harton project to kick in, and we'll start to see the levels that we had historically increase over and above in the same way that we've seen with fitness. From a gym user perspective, we break it down into terms of junior usage, and we are seeing a huge increase in the number of people under 16. So we do a teen gym session, which is 11 to 16. We've seen an increase of 28,000 visits plus, and that's really been a popular increase that we've seen at Grange, Paddocks and Hartham. Adults, again, we've seen not the same level of increase, but again, it's 76%, which is another 114,000 visits. Similarly, with the senior gym sessions, they've not necessarily increased to the same level that we've seen across the other demographics, but the projects that we've done around with the Never Too Late campaign and various different programs that we've introduced with Parkinson's, we are starting to see people coming back and using the centre and being more active, certainly in that demographic. The one thing that we talk about, it's all well and good if you have one person that comes to the gym 7 days a week, that's amazing. But it's the number of unique users, the number of people that we're actually making a difference to in our community. So we use a system called single customer view. Essentially, we've seen that in the last 12 months from 2021 to 22, we've seen essentially 3,162 more unique users coming into the centres. That doesn't matter how many times they've come in, they're just unique users that are coming in. We break that down into multi-active, which is in line with the government's 30 minutes 5 times a week. Unfortunately, it's also our corporate strapline as well. And we've seen that increase by 9%, which is marginally only an increase of 124 people. The 3G pitch, you'll see in the football numbers that you've got there has increased exponentially. We've had a couple of difficult years with COVID where the leagues have been extended and sessions have been played over different periods, but essentially year on year, since opening the 3G pitch at the back end of October last year, we saw 4,000 visits in 2022 from October until December, which is hugely popular. From a product perspective, we focus on learn to swim. Obviously, the quality that people get in terms of learning to swim as a life skill is critical. There is some startling numbers in terms of post-COVID, the number of children that get to secondary school level that can't swim 25 metres. We are currently working with Heart Sports Partnership on a programme to see whether we can plan some top-up sessions coming in September, just to increase that. The numbers that we're talking about here are the number of people that are on our Learn to Swim programme. So in 2021, whilst we didn't have Hartham open at that point, we're in a situation that we've seen the schemes increase by 673, which is a 49% increase in terms of the number of people that have joined onto the scheme. Currently, at the end of 2022, we've got 4,387 people that are learning to swim on our scheme. One of our key objectives is to be in a situation that we report back on the number of people that are actually able to swim 25 metres, and we're using that as a benchmark of success in terms of what we do. From a scheme perspective, we talk about that. If I would have remembered it's in the programme, I would have been able to tell you that last year we saw 1,097 people be able to achieve in that calendar year the ability to swim past Key Stage 2. Currently, one of the challenges that we're having is around recruitment of swim teachers, and we've focused in terms of last year, we've got 12 new swim teachers. Our target this year is 36 new swim teachers that we're training. And we're providing a number of training programs to get people involved with swimming and getting people to teach that life skill. From a school swimming perspective, it's obviously been a little bit slower in relation to what we've seen over the last 4 years, but we're working in partnership with 43 local schools and they're using the pool for space and learn to swim sessions. From a membership perspective, obviously the increase that we've seen at Grange Paddocks has been mirrored in terms of an increase in membership. One of the things that's quite noticeable on the table that you've got on the top right hand side is we had a peak around September where we had 8,409 people on our membership programs, which is, you know, almost 1,300 more than what we had in, yeah, I've got that number right, 1,300 more than what we had in the same year previously. The cost of living crisis has obviously been something that we've needed to combat when that kicked in at the back end of September last year. Now, this year, we're back up to over 8,400 people attending our membership programs. From an operational perspective, there's a summary in terms of the number of people that have had accidents. There is always a balance in terms of accidents of whether they are first aid. I kind of lose count of the amount of reports where little Timmy or little Charlotte has picked a scab off in a swimming lesson or a school session. These are accidents we've got. It is an increase of 86 in relation to that. That isn't a cause for concern for us. What we use as a benchmark from a company perspective is accidents per 10,000 visits. Now, essentially what we've seen is that there's a slight reduction, and across the board in 2021, it was 0.93 per 10,000 visits. Last year, it was down by 0.013. So there isn't a significant increase. I think it's a case of that's obviously aligned in terms of participation. So the more people are coming in, sadly, we would anticipate there would be a few more people that are going to have a bump and a scrape. From a customer feedback perspective, we've received 649. What we use corporately is a digital case management system called Single Customer View, where all of the feedback that is processed through our website is allocated into either an inquiry or feedback, and we have the ability to case manage that. So over time, we have seen that increase. Granted, last year in 2021, the number, although it's wrong on my sheet, has actually reduced by a little in relation to what we've got. From a customer service perspective, we've seen a slight decrease. It dropped by 4.5% from the previous year. There's a degree of sanity in terms of what we're looking at from there, that we've seen more people feedback to that. Previously, we would have had colleagues ask customers about their service. We're now in a situation in the digital age that we live in where customers are automatically sent surveys after they've been in the centre, and they're sent a survey every 6 months. So if you're an Everyone Active card holder and you get an email from us, it will be feeding that back in. And we are seeing that people are giving us a much more robust and honest approach as opposed to a solicited response when we've kind of spoken to people in the centre. One of the factors that we're looking at the moment is obviously value for money. And this was a new question that we introduced off the back of the cost of living crisis. At the moment, we're seeing that at 78%. I'd like it to be 87%. And that's something that we'll continue to do. From an active travel perspective, we've seen a slight increase in the number of people that are using the centre from an active travel perspective. That's increased by 1% from 34.5 last year to 35.5%. From a colleague perspective, we are but the sum of our colleagues that deliver the service for us, and we are proud to be your partner. So we've generated 30 new lifeguards. We have 102 colleagues that last year received dementia awareness training. The world that we live in is very changeable, and we need to be in a situation that our colleagues are better trained, better advised and upskilled in relation to making sure that we are accessible for all users that come into the centre. 4% of our colleagues have a registered disability. 89% of our colleagues live in a 20-minute drive time of the centre, and 52% of our managers are female. From an environmental perspective, there's a breakdown in relation to what we've got from our recycling perspective. We have seen a marginal increase. The leisure industry standard we're looking to achieve is 35%. Last year, we haven't quite achieved that across the 5 sites that we operate. We achieved 25.95%. Now, on the right-hand side, you'll see our Jog On programme. We teamed up with Jog On, and essentially we've been inundated with trainers at Grange Paddocks, where we probably are sending between 100 to 200 trainers every 2 months that go off to either be recycled for charities or they get used in third world microeconomies. There's a nice synergy in terms of people being able to recycle the trainers that they use. There's a report that essentially it takes 200 years for a trainer to biodegrade, so it's useful for us to kind of support that. From a colleague awareness perspective, certainly in terms of environmental, last year it's been a key theme in terms of what we've got. There are just some examples in terms of what we've done. We've had various different months where we've had a focus on recycling, focus on wastewater, focus in terms of making sure everybody is managing those marginal gains in terms of energy. Across the board in terms of training, we've also just launched our environmental and net zero carbon policy last year, and we are working with our various different systems to look at how best we manage the building and be in a situation that we minimise our energy uses across the board. There are some examples in terms of what we use from an energy and water reduction plan, and being in a situation of what we've got. From a summary perspective, last year and apologies if anybody notices the the main pools are a little bit cooler than what they were. We have reduced the pool temperatures down by 1 degree. We have seen a few little grumbles in relation to that, but essentially off the back of the energy crisis, that saves us 8 to 10% in terms of energy consumption. We're also in a situation that we've done various different situations in terms of isolating our AHUs, where essentially they're fixed temperatures and people that work in offices can't have it at 18 degrees if it's warm outside, or if it's cold, it can't go to 30. We're also in a situation that we've got timers on our 3G pitch where we're just in that situation. We manage and marginalise everything that we've got. One of the things that everybody would have noticed is that energy costs have increased. Included here is just the summary in terms of the differences that have been paid over the last 2 years in terms of our average kilowatt costs from a gas and electricity perspective. Essentially, in terms of our energy use, there's a summary there in terms of what we've got. Last year, we saw an actual increase in terms of energy consumption. That's purely down to the fact that the Hearth and Pool project has reopened, and obviously heating water of that volume obviously requires a large degree of energy and gas and electricity consumption. Similarly, in terms of gas consumption, it gives you a short overview in terms of what we've got to. Our key objective every year is that we're aiming to save 1 to 2% on our energy consumption from the previous year, and really are trying to be in a situation that we manage and control what we can to minimise those increases in terms of the impact in terms of the tariff increase. From a water consumption perspective, we obviously noticed that last year it's increased. That's pretty much down to Hearth and reopening. There is a very brief overview in terms of our health and wellbeing strategy, and one of the things that's been introduced across the industry is social value calculator. There's a summary in terms of how this has been calculated. Essentially what this does is between Full Global and Sheffield Hallam University and Experience, they break people down into various different demographics and have worked out potentially what the social value is in terms of people using the centres. I can't claim to be an expert on it, but obviously we know that people that are exercising have an improved, or being active reduces the risk of coronary heart disease. Sadly, it does increase the risk of people being injured and having joint things. So all of those kind of things are factored in. Now, this essentially is the breakdown of what we achieved in East Herts in 2020. So you'll see across the board that we're in a situation that the social value for last year was £4.7 million. And there's a breakdown in terms of how that summary is achieved. There's a breakdown in terms of how those indicators are calculated in terms of physical and mental health improvements, subjective wellbeing, individual development and community development. There's obviously an increase because obviously we've got more people being active, there is a risk, and there's 103,000 allocated for people getting more injuries off the back of being more active. From a benchmarking perspective, we now sign up with Full Global, and this is part of a platform called Moving Communities. As part of this, it gives us benchmarking scores to see how we compare against other authorities and other Everyone Active sites. The summary there gives you a benchmark in terms of the SCV index. Obviously 100 is the best score, and as per all of the kind of quartile incentives, it gives you a rough idea in terms of how well we're performing, which is very good. There's a breakdown in terms of what the social value is per site and a summary in terms of what that looks like, along with a breakdown in terms of what the people outcomes are. I mentioned earlier, and I apologise that I am kind of rushing through my presentation. I did put quite a lot of slides in and got excited, I'm afraid. Our community health and wellbeing strategy, last year we had 112 people in the Parkinson's membership. We've had more people join that this year. We also offered Ukrainian guest memberships. So off the back of that, they needed to complete some qualitative data in terms of just saying the benefit of what they received to the community in terms of being active, but we had 213 people sign up to that. We've just introduced cared for memberships for individuals that are in care or parents that are carers. At the moment, we are working on developing that and getting that to more than 3 that we've got. We also have a partners with Weight Watchers where we've got 20 people that are part of a weight management program from there. And there's just a very brief summary in terms of what we've got from there. There's a bit of an overview on that last page, which just talks about our dementia-friendly program and the various different bits and pieces that we've got. can breathe.
Thank you very much, Dan. That is, yes, you went through that at a fair rate of knots. So any comments or questions for relating to the slides? Councillor Jacobs.
I was going to say, Councillor Jacobs, thank you for that update. It was said earlier that there are no stupid questions, so I'm going to put that to the test. You've given us lots of numbers and there's a lot to absorb there, but I didn't see any numbers relating to SLAs. So does that imply that we don't have SLAs, or that wasn't part of the presentation?
It wasn't necessarily part of the presentation. We set as part of the slide that I'm about to show you, we set a number of targets in terms of participation. Obviously, the key focus in terms of getting more people more active, and we've kind of talked about the impact of what they've got. So from an LSA perspective, you'll see that our targets there are broken down in terms of what we do. So before the start of every contract year, we will sit and agree with the leisure team what our objectives are in terms of looking to increase participation from there. Naturally, you can kind of see from some of those numbers that the increase that we've had is exponential. And we are performing in terms of where we need to be on from a participation perspective.
Thank you there. You okay, David?
I think so. Perhaps one slide that told me that would have been useful, actually. So measuring performance against SLAs, just for future reference.
Excellent, thank you. Yes.
Hello, I'm Bob Deering. I've just got a couple of things to say, or maybe three. Firstly, thank you for the presentation, Dan. There's quite a lot of work gone into the presentation, so that's appreciated. That your presentation wasn't in my pack, so through the chair, could that be circulated to all of us?
Certainly,
I think
yes.
that'd be very useful. And the second thing I wanted to say, hopefully with the indulgence of the committee, and possibly through you, Chair, talking to anybody in the public who's watching this, brave people, we are less than a month from the election. This is a terrific report about terrific initiatives taken by this council, and I think it's right that I should just gently make the point that this is all attributable to the previous administration, and we're very proud of what we've done and what we've committed for the residents of Hertfordshire, and we're very pleased to see the benefits coming through.
Certainly, thank you very much. Any other comments?
Thank you very much for your very concise and clear presentation. Could I just ask one question? You talked about the temperature control, about reducing temperature in terms of saving energy and obviously cost of living plus and cost of energy generally. You mentioned something about you set it at 20 degrees, or I wasn't entirely clear what it was you were talking about in terms of reducing it by 1 degree. I understand the water temperature, but what about the temperature overall?
Yeah.
Is that also fixed in all the sites in terms of the kind of?
Where it can be fixed, we're in a situation that we've regulated office spaces so they're set to 20 degrees. There is a luxury that sometimes people think when they work in an office that they'd like it cooler, they'd like it hotter. We're in a situation now where we just need to control that temperature, the timeframes of when people are in that office, and we've just been in a situation where we can control those marginal gains. We've just kind of limited it down. So from a colleague perspective, if it's a warm day, some of them will not like me because they can't have it down to 18 degrees. Similarly, if it's very cold, they're going to have to put their jacket on and not put the air conditioning up to 26 degrees.
Yeah, I'm just a bit curious about how you've landed on this figure of 20 degrees, but how did you decide that instead of kind of like 19 degrees in one level and allowing it to be a little bit warmer, a little bit hotter, for you to save another couple of degrees in that way? But just
Sure.
curious.
So that's in relation to office space. So we've just taken guidance in terms of what we've picked up from Sport England in relation to what they feel that should be. Certainly in terms of the pool temperatures, we've used the pool water advisory group temperatures, and we're kind of at the lower threshold of what those temperatures are. As an industry, obviously the energy crisis has been quite a substantial situation and affected quite a lot of other leisure authorities. We're now working, QTEC have actually lowered some of their guidance levels down to to lower temperatures.
Yeah, I can see the difficulties with pool temperatures, being much less flexible and hardy cold swim probably doesn't go down that well. But I'm just more curious about the office temperatures, because obviously you do have more flexibility about staff kind of, as you say, gaining or losing layers in order to regulate body temperature rather than having to rely just on this one static 20 degrees.
Yeah.
I'm just curious if there's any kind of flexibility around that.
It sounds very harsh to say. What we've kind of looked at is that where we have the ability to manage it through technology and set that so that there isn't someone coming into the office and saying, I'm cold, I now want to put it down to 18 degrees. We've just limited that ability for our colleagues. It might not necessarily win us any awards with some of the colleagues, but we've just decided that we're in a situation that we need to just control some of those things. So where we've got a building management system, for example, at Grange Paddocks, where we know that offices are not occupied for the 16 hours a day that the centre's open, we've now controlled that so that if, for example, the membership team don't come in till 9 o'clock, the air handling doesn't come on until 10 to 9, so that we can just limit any kind of excess energy that we may would have been using before in the past.
Is it terribly cruel to suggest it could go down 1 more degree to 19? Would that be, cause
In the
a lot of
winter, of
difficulty?
course, and in the summer it can go out to 21. We're obviously mindful in terms of colleagues around that, and I think in terms of doing that, office politics sometimes means that just removing people's ability to change something or open windows or do something different it's not been an issue that we've faced in terms of the team at the moment.
Thank you very much for that.
Any other questions or comments by any of the members? No, I think we're fine. Thank you. Now I understand that the recommendation for this is detailed on page 31 and of the agenda pack, and it's for noting and it's not for a vote. So if we're all okay with that, then we'll proceed. Right. Next point, the Hertford Theatre Pricing Strategy Report. Again, Councillor Hopewell.
Thank you. As members will be aware, the council's been developing the Hertford Theatre Growth and Legacy project, and I'm pleased to confirm that the project is on track for opening in spring 2024. As part of our preparation for opening, following a review of the business plan, we need to confirm the pricing strategy. The report in front of you this evening captures the key principles for pricing across different areas, including ticket prices and studio hire. This is an investor-safe project, and the project team have worked closely with our business consultants to ensure that pricing is fair, equitable, and reflective of the needs of the new business. I welcome any questions from the committee, and we have Rhys Thomas here, who has far more expertise on this. Thank you.
Thank you there, Councillor. Questions?
Thank you, Chairman. Jeff Williamson. Yes, I'd just like to try and understand a little bit further on the table on page 65, the higher charges. I can see that we've started with a base price, for example, on line 12, which is the 9 in the morning to 1 in the afternoon price, £69. We've added to that an element of inflation since the 2018-20 figures arrived at. And then there's a factor for the increase in capacity, which has been taken as we're just applying a 33% to the 37%, if that makes sense. I'm just wondering if you could explain why it's been chosen to be a third rather than a half or a quarter as a factor to apply. Thank you.
Sorry, can I just interject here? I just want to remind members that we are, should they wish to discuss information contained within Appendix C of the report, we will move to exclude the press and the public on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information. Sorry, you can continue, Councillor.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Williamson for the question. Obviously, the figures are predicated on meeting the targets within the business case. The 12.5%, which represents a third of the chargeable capacity, is just really a sort of an attempt not to fully reflect the increase in capacity. We do need to acknowledge that we're going from 400 to 550 seats, but this is was deemed to be a moderate approach in terms of acknowledging that increase without reflecting it in full.
Thank you. So the third was deemed to be perhaps it brought it into sort of market rates, or could we have gone for a half?
Well,
or would that make it too expensive?
My apologies, cutting across you there. Yes, I think it would have made it too expensive. All these figures have been benchmarked by Barker Langham, our business consultants, and these are the figures that they are comfortable with when benchmarked against other theatres in the district and beyond.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Councillor Jacobs.
I was going to ask a question about benchmarking, but you beat me to on that one. Just looking at the report 213, which in my pack is on page 61. For events, productions and merchandise, you say that each production that is curated from part of the programme is made available to the theatre on a variety of terms, guaranteed fee, percentage box office split, etc. How does that align with the fixed price regime that you've outlined elsewhere in the paper?
Yes, so the curated programme doesn't come into the building on a hire basis. So that programme, so for example, a Michael McIntyre would come into the building by invitation on an agreed deal with the promoter. The fixed prices are for those people who want to take the building on, or a space on, in its entirety and take all of the box office by way of return. And that's the model that we use. So for example, if there's a local dance school, for example, or an amateur organisation that wants to bring in a piece of work, they can do so on the basis of the fixed hire costs, as opposed to the curated programme, which is delivered on a variety of deals with the promoter.
Do you want to come back?
No, are you okay?
Where's the line drawn between the two?
So this is a commercial question and an important question. So the curated programme is really about developing audiences and audience groups, and also developing a breadth and depth in terms of the offer. We are comfortable, I think, to support non-professional organisations as much as we reasonably can, but it, I think, would be not sensible from a business point of view to be carrying the risk of those shows. So we carry the risk of the curated productions, or part of the risk, but we don't carry the risk for non-professional work.
Thank you. Yep.
Jess Hannam, Head of Operations. I think just to add to that, so the whole point of this investment is obviously an investor save programme. So one of our drivers was to increase participation. So there is a balancing of the programme in relation to what will be commercial and what would be community outreach. So ultimately the team are experts in that area in relation to understanding what's going on in the community, doing that piece of research around balancing what community organisations need, what marginalised groups need in terms of, removing that intimidation with a theatre building, as well as being able to return on our investment. So there is a balance there. And as part of the process with audit and governance, we will be coming back annually with our financial reporting on that. So again, it's just a balance of ensuring that we cover all aspects of our community.
Thank you. Any further questions? Oh, Councillor Dillon.
Yes, hi. You can almost predict what I'm going to say about this as well, can't you? But I think it's important that these things don't get lost in the wash. The Hertford Theatre will be a fantastic project, not just for Hertford, but for all of East Hertfordshire. Reece and his team have lived with it for many, many years and remained diligent and brave. Actually, it's been very challenging from time to time. I think Reece and his team deserve a lot of credit for it, and I'm not going to be squeamish in saying that I think the previous administration of this council deserves huge credit for it as well. It's a wonderful legacy that we've inherited to Hertford and East Herts.
Thank you. No, very good. Any more points? Okay, then. So there is one recommendation for this item, which is detailed on page 58 of the agenda pack. And that recommendation is for Audit and Governance Committee to endorse the principle of and approach to charging for all aspects of the new Hertford Theatre building as outlined in this report in order to inform the executive's consideration for adoption. Could I have someone to propose and second? We have a proposer?
Councillor Hart, I can propose this motion.
Thank you. Seconded, yes, Councillor Walcombe. Thank you. So members, can you raise your hands to indicate whether you are in favour or against? So those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. It's carried. Next item. Receipt of External Auditors Annual Report 2020 and 2021. Stephen.
Thank you, Chairman. The external auditor is going to present their auditor's annual report for the financial year 2021. The report will reference a number of issues in relation to the statement of accounts, which the previous committee considered at their meeting on the 5th of April of 2022, and also did meeting of the subcommittee on the 16th of March in 2023. And I provided members the web link to the interim audit results report and the final audit results report issues that were decided by those committees for their information. The committee is here on behalf of council to receive the external auditor's report. The external auditor's results report is the external auditor's report. Officers can comment on the factual accuracy, but cannot influence in any way, shape or form what the external auditor wishes to say in their report. I'd like to introduce Debbie Hanson from EY PLC, who are our external auditors for the 2021 financial year, and Debbie will take you through her report.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. I think before taking you through the report, what I'd like to do is just provide some clarity on some of the points that have been referred to in the Section 151 officers covering report, just because I think they're points that would be useful for the committee to ensure you have a full understanding of. So on page 79 of your pack, so section 1, paragraph 1.5 of the covering report, there's reference to the kind of the obviously protracted time frame for the completion of the audit of the financial statements, and reference to sort of repeated submission of working papers. Just I thought it'd be helpful for the committee to understand the process and procedures we have in place with the finance team in relation to working papers. So we operate something called a Canvas portal, which is an electronic mechanism for basically communication between ourselves as the audit team and the finance team. That portal enables council officers to basically put information, response to requests, etc., onto that system, which means that every member of the audit team can access those working papers. So it's lots more secure than using email. And it also means that it's not sitting on one individual's laptop. We had a discussion with the finance team earlier regarding that comment and that query, just to try to get some clarity around that. And what it seems is that we structure our queries around the statements of accounts and the different areas of those. And some of the council's working papers will actually cover a number of different queries from our perspective. So the council may have one working paper that, for example, links to 5 audit queries. And I think that's where that comment is coming from. So it's not saying that we've kind of mislaid working papers. What it's saying is that sometimes the council has to load that same working paper on a number of different areas of our requests. So what we've said is we'll have further discussions with the council for the next year's audit to see if we can streamline that process further to avoid the council having to post the same working paper on a number of different occasions. So we'll do some work around that. I also thought it was worth clarifying the comments around actuarial valuations, because this is something that causes challenges at a number of councils. So in relation to the 2021 audit, there was a particular problem identified in that the council's actuary had made some errors in relation to the calculations of the net pensions liability for all of the bodies in Hertfordshire. And this was related to a shared service in relation to Hertfordshire Building Control, which for a number of years the actuary had made certain assumptions about how those adjustments should go through. They were actually incorrect, and as a result of that, the actuary had to issue an updated IAS 19 report, which sets out the net pension liabilities that the council reports in its accounts. So that particular issue arose because of an error made by the actuary and wasn't actually related to the sort of timetable of the audit at all. For 21-22, there have been additional IAS 19 reports that the council has had to request. The first of those was basically following the fact that the actuary produces the report which they provide to the council for the purpose of producing the council's accounts based on estimated year-end performance of the pension fund. And that's because at the point the actuary does that work, the pension fund accounts have not been produced, therefore they don't have the year-end figures. The actuary therefore makes certain assumptions, and as part of our review of that as an estimate, we will always look at if there's any more up-to-date information, which generally will be the pension fund accounts, which have the true position in relation to the performance of the fund, and in particular, the performance of the investments within that fund. The work last year identified that there'd been some material movements between the estimate made by the actuary and then the actual year-end position, and as a result, the council requested an updated IAS 19 report. In addition to that, because of the fact that the council then received, or the pension fund, apologies, received triennial valuation as at March 2022 in March 2023, meant that that triennial report had to be taken into account as information received after the year-end date, which could potentially impact on the values as at the 31st of March 22. This is an issue that's impacted on all the audits in Hertfordshire that are still open, and actually is a national issue, which has been linked to the fact that audits are later than they would normally be, and therefore normally we would have signed off before that triennial information came through. As we have not, the council has had to go back and ask for an updated report in relation to that, to take that into account as post-balance sheet information. So I thought it's worth clarifying that. I also wanted to clarify references to sort of the time frame between when we obviously brought our initial audit results report, which was March 22, and then the actual final conclusion of the audit, which was around 12 months later in March of this year. There were a number of different elements I think came to play there. So our work was substantially complete in March 2022, but there were some areas that we were still concluding on. Unfortunately, some audit adjustments were identified in those areas, and that took the council time to work through and us time to work through. And then we were not provided with the council's updated going concern assessment, which is a key element of our conclusion, until November 2022. So until we'd received all of those, we weren't in a position to conclude the audit. So it does sound like quite a long elapsed time, but there was work ongoing from both sides during that period. Obviously, we'd be looking to try to shorten that period going forwards. And then I just wanted to clarify in relation to the position on the 21-22 audit. So we actually started that in January of this year. So we actually started that before we'd concluded and issued the opinion on 2021, which is quite unusual. But we did that because we had actually completed all of our audit procedures with the exception of the going concern work, and were satisfied that therefore we were in a position to start that audit. And we did that to try to catch up in effect, to bring the audit back into more of a timetable that we'd expect. We were hoping that we'd be able to complete all of that work by the end of March. Unfortunately, that wasn't possible. There are still a number of information requests which are sitting with the council. We recognise that the timing has probably contributed to that, in that the council's also been trying to do the budget and various other sort of internal processes and actions within that period. And what we need to do now is work with the finance team to get a clear timetable for when the council can provide all of the outstanding requests for information, once we have that date, we will then schedule our audit team to come in and complete the audit work. And Rachel will go through the plan timings for that when she goes through the plan. But I just wanted to assure the committee that we are not working to a November 23 completion date, which I think is referred to in the recovery report, and we've never been working to that date. So I think there's been a slight confusion, maybe an inclusion of that date, but we'll go through that when we go through the audit plan. Before taking you through the ARR, because I think those were the only points I wanted to really just clarify and draw to your attention, I'll pause for a moment, but then I will move on to taking you through the actual report itself. But just if there's any questions on those points of clarification, as I know some of those are quite technical areas.
Thank you. Any questions from councillors? One, councillor Deering.
Yeah, thanks. I've got a question probably for Steve Lynette, if he's with me. Yes, hello. You don't necessarily need to go into the detail, but obviously this delay is very significant and you've tracked in your report the consequences for us. I just use a deliberately neutral expression. Have we reserved our position with the auditors over this delay, or does it not call for that?
Thank you, Stephen.
Yeah, so thank you, Chairman. The auditor has included at the a second appendix in which they are going to go to PSAA for additional fees. We will make certain representations to PSAA. The last time that PSAA moderated on the fees, I think they awarded 33% of what the auditor had asked for. It was about 30,000 instead of 60 something. That wasn't it? Is that right? I can't remember exactly, but it was certainly less than they'd asked for. I mean, the whole external audit market, quite frankly, is just falling apart, really, and we are facing the prospect that there'll be 1,000 audit opinions outstanding very shortly. They bid for these audit contracts in a competitive tendering organisation. They all cut each other's throats down to unsustainable levels of audit fee, and we're now paying the consequence for it. So, I mean, the next round of audit appointments, which has just been confirmed by PSAA, and we will move from EY to ASET's audit services, the audit fees will increase by 150%. And I mean, Deluxe is trying to make a new system leader in what the FRC will move over to a new body. These problems do not occur in Wales, and they do not occur in Scotland, where Audit Scotland carry out the audits, and they do the Scottish government and Scottish local authorities, and around 70% is done by their own audit practice and 30% by the firms. And the Welsh Audit Office does the Welsh Assembly Government and Welsh local government, and 70% is done by their audit practice and 30% is done by the firms. And we never had this problem when we had the Audit Commission, when 70% of it was done by their audit practice and 30% was done by the firms. So I think the whole system is broken. I'm not entirely sure that what Deluxe are doing will fix it.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you. That was a much longer answer than I was expecting, for which thanks. But in the middle of it all, I'm not quite sure what the answer to the question I put to you is. So have we reserved our position with Ernst & Young and or third parties over these delays?
I'm not entirely sure what you mean by reserved our position, because the audit fees are the scale fee set by PSAA, so that's the scale fee we pay, and then any additional fees will have to be moderated by PSAA. That's the process on audit fees. Are you suggesting some other potential remedy?
Well, I'm putting the question to you. Obviously, this delay, and you've mapped it out in your report, has caused us inconvenience, extra work, and therefore extra cost. So we might say to ourselves that we'd like reimbursement of that from the auditors, or we might simply have said that we are reserving our position. I think you know perfectly well what reserving a position means. I'd just like an answer to the question, please.
Stephen.
I'm not entirely certain, Chairman, that we're in a position where, because of the way that the audit is conducted under a statutory regime, I would have to take the monitoring officer's advice on that one. And I mean, we certainly haven't said it either way to the external auditors, and there's been no conversation about this. So I'd have to consult with the monitoring officer. I'm afraid I can't answer Councillor Deering's question.
Well, that's fine. But if Steve could get back to us once he's undertaken that consultation.
Certainly, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. If I may just clarification on that point about the delays, although I would, as covered in my sort of opening comments, there clearly have been delays in the audit. I would note that some of those are due to the council's capacity and therefore the challenges they've had in responding to our queries on a timely basis. And as I said, the going concern assessment is a prime example of that, where we did not receive that until November of last year, despite having been asking that since about March. So I would note that although there have been delays, I don't think it would be appropriate to say they are wholly due to EY. I think there are definitely capacity issues, and they were actually discussed at length at the last committee, when I think the Section 151 officer was actually putting in a bid and request to strengthen the finance team by getting some additional funding for that. And I think that is very important that the finance team has the support it needs.
Councillor Goodwin.
Every now and again, you just regret asking a question. Don't you? But I appreciate what you've just said, and the reason I put my question the way I did is because I don't think this is the forum to debate, you know, the whys and the wherefores of it, and who's to blame and who isn't to blame, and all that sort of thing. And that's exactly why the question was whether we have reserved our position, which is a fairly neutral thing to do. I just so you know, I've heard what you've said, and we'll have to see where we go.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone else? No.
So, Chair, if I can take you through the report now, as I said, I just thought it was important to provide the clarity on the cover report, because that forms part of the papers for this meeting. So I thought it was important to set out that position from
Certainly.
for the committee's understanding. So the annual audit report and auditor's annual report is basically the report that we're required to produce following the conclusion of the audit work. It sets out both our work on the opinion audits, and that largely repeats what was in the previous reports that we took to the previous committee, which is what we call our ISA 260 or our audit results report. But the key additional information that's included in this is our commentary on the council's value for money arrangements, because they are not included in the report we bring on the financial statements. So this is the first time that we have commented on these in a report which has come to a committee and which will be on the council's website. So we have included details on page 86, and we set out that we issued an unqualified opinion on the council's financial statements, and we also had no issues to report in relation to value for money arrangements, which meant we had no concerns and we didn't assess any weaknesses in arrangements. I wasn't going to go through in detail, but I think if members have looked through the report, you'll see that there were quite a number of findings on the opinion audit. So we actually had 4 adjustments that were identified that also reflected errors in the previous years, and so the previous year balances had to be restated. And we identified issues on a number of different areas. As I said, I wasn't proposing to go through those. I know that you're new members of this committee, but obviously you have had access to look at that report which was previously presented. But as I said, there were a number of errors, and that will feed through into our plan, which Rachel will take you through on the next item in terms of our risk assessment for the next year. What I did, however, want to take you through was just the value for money section, which starts on page 105. So that basically reports our findings against 3 key areas that we are required to look at under the NAO code. So that includes financial sustainability, governance arrangements, and then the council's arrangements to improve economy, efficiency and effectiveness. We provided a commentary under each of those 3 areas, which I think is self-explanatory, but just by way of a very broad oversight. In terms of financial sustainability, the council has a robust process in terms of developing a medium-term financial strategy and updating that on a regular basis. There are also processes in place to identify required savings and to put plans in place to deliver those savings. The council also has a process for earmarking reserves to ensure that they are set aside for potential risk areas, and also has a general fund minimum balance that's set at 2 million. And in the 2021 financial statements, the actual general fund balance reported at year end was 3.85 million, so above the minimum level set by the Section 151 officer. So I think all positive in terms of those arrangements that are in place. In terms of governance, the council has a risk management policy and process in place. It also has an internal audit service that has a risk assessed audit plan and then reports regularly back to this committee on findings, and those actions from those reports are followed up, and also has appropriate sort of HR policies and other policies in place to support the effective governance of the council. In terms of arrangements for value for money, in addition to monitoring the financial performance and reporting on that throughout the year, the council has already also set a number of key performance indicators. and they are monitored on a quarterly basis. And that I think is an appropriate frequency for those reports. There's also a procurement team in place who support the council in terms of procurement processes, and the council also has a number of partnerships, mainly with Stevenage and North Hertfordshire Council, that help provide a number of services and aim to achieve efficiencies through joint working, etc. So, and those are managed through a partnership board as well. So I think overall we were satisfied with the council's arrangements in relation to those three areas, and that's why we had no comment in our audit opinion. But we have included, as I said, a little more detail here in terms of the areas that we assessed. I wasn't going to give any more detail. As I said, we've set out the key findings in all of our risk areas on the opinion within this report. I think my overall view would be there's probably more adjustments and errors in the accounts identified than we would want to be seeing, and so we'll be working with the finance team for 21-22, and hopefully those levels of errors and issues will reduce in the coming years. Very happy to take any questions or comments.
Thank you there. Anyone? David?
Looking at page 87 of the pack, in the executive summary, it says that as a result of this work, we have not yet issued our certificate for 2021, as we've not yet performed the procedures required by the National Audit Office, etc. Am I right in understanding that means, therefore, this audit is incomplete?
This is a very unusual scenario, and again applies to every single council in the country. So alongside our work on the financial statements and value for money, we also undertake work on behalf of the NAO as the component auditor for the NAO, and undertake procedures on the council's whole of government account submission. So that basically replicates what's in the financial statements, but in a different format, and is submitted to central government for the purpose of producing the whole of government accounts. In previous years, the NAO has set a threshold, and councils that have expenditure or income or assets that fall below that threshold are not required. We're not required to perform any procedures, and therefore we just do a return to the NAO and say that you're below the threshold, no procedures, we can issue our certificates. For 2021, the NAO is changing its arrangements, and for a number of councils that fall below the threshold, as indicated, it will be sampled, selecting a sample of those and asking auditors to perform additional procedures for those councils. Unfortunately, as yet, it has not shared the list of councils that it wants to sample, or the procedures that will be required to be undertaken at those councils. So until we know whether East Hertfordshire has been a sampled component and what those procedures are, we cannot issue our certificates. As I said, every council is in that position because we just have not been given a list. So we potentially may have more work to do if you are sampled. Equally, we may have no further work to do, but until the NAO clarify that position, we are all in the unfortunate position that we can't issue the certificate to say we've discharged all of our responsibilities under the NAO code.
Thank you.
I don't mean to be flippant, but that was a no, wasn't it?
It was a potential no. There may be no further work to be done, but we don't know. It's not within our control or within the council's control. So we are purely waiting for the NAO to confirm the position.
Thank you. Any other questions? All okay there? So I just have one question myself. I'm new, obviously, to this, and there may be a history to this, but in your view, is the audit for the 2021, is that really a reflection of how previously the council was audited? So are they operating to that standard, but the standard has moved?
It's difficult for me to comment on the prior year because that wasn't an audit that I completed. It was clearly an EY audit, but the team has been a wholesale change in the team for the audit because of staff changes. I would say the level of errors identified was obviously greater than in prior years, and the fact that 4 of the areas that we identified also had an impact on the prior year and had to be corrected in that year. Part of that is probably due to increased focus on some areas. So for example, one of the areas was quite a technical accounting area, which was the need to write back accumulated depreciation when assets are revalued. It has no impact on the bottom line. It's presentational only, but it's quite a technical, complex area which got picked up. So I think it's a combination probably of greater focus on some areas following increased focus by regulators on a number of areas, plus emerging issues nationally, which we also picked up. And as I said, what we're hoping is that we'll find less errors when we're doing the 21-22 audit.
Okay, thank you. So on that basis, members, the recommendation for this item is detailed both within page 78 and 129 of the agenda pack. The item is just for receiving and does not require members to vote. So, thank you. So next item, item 12, annual. Oh, sorry.
Point of order, I do believe we do need to formally receive the report as a committee.
Michelle?
Technically, it's just for receiving, so you don't need a vote on this item.
I stand corrected. Apologies.
Sorry, thank you. Very good. 11, I thought we just covered that. Okay. Sorry, correction then. Receipt of external auditors provisional audit planning report 2021-2022. Stephen.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, I'll just hand straight over to, is it Rachel Merez from EY, who'll take you through their provisional audit planning report for 21-22.
Thank you, Stephen. For this agenda item, I won't bore you with the details and all that, but I will take the report as read and just highlight 3 items in the report. So first is the risk, second is materiality, and third is value for money. So on the risk section, you can find that on page 138 of the agenda pack. I would say that primarily the risks identified for 21-22 are largely similar to what were identified in the 2021 audit. So that includes misstatements due to fraud, which we as the auditors are required to consider during the audit. Linked to this is the risk on incorrect capitalization of revenue spent, which is the second risk in the report. This was identified because there is a 25 million additions of PPE for 21-22. And we think that capitalizing those revenue spend as PPE or capital might be one way of the council to manipulate accounts, account figures. And so we need to perform additional procedures to identify if that was the case or not. Third risk is valuation of property, plant, and equipment and investment properties. So this arose because of the materiality level of land and buildings, surplus assets, and investment property. On this area, as in previous years, we are engaging our EY internal specialist in order to review the valuation of some of the properties and also perform review of valuation of the properties of for the core team. So there is no change in approach in this area of risk, but rather we will just select samples and go from there. We will report to you any errors identified in this area in our audit results report. Next risk is the grant income recognition, which is specific to COVID-19. So this arose in 2021 because of the level of grant income that the council received specific to COVID-19, and especially the conditions and restrictions in relation to those grants. So in 21-22, the same risk is identified because the council still received a number of grants during the year. Next risk is pension liability valuation, which was discussed in detail earlier today. The level of liability of the council is about 28.5 million, which is highly material compared to our materiality levels. And this is why it's also one of the risk areas that we are focusing on this year. Next risk is going concern disclosure, and this is retained as a risk because of the unpredictability of current market. There are also factors such as COVID-19 and Ukraine-Russia war, as well as other economic factors. New risk for 21-22 relates to provision for minimum revenue, which is merely checking if the council has provided the required level of provision for this area. On the materiality levels, which is on page 140 of the agenda pack, for planning materiality, we are still using 2% of gross revenue expenditure, which is same as last year. Although for the tolerable error, we reduced our percentage to 50%. In previous years, we are using 75%. So the reason for the decrease was because of the quantum of errors that were identified in previous years. So that has fed back into the materiality levels. For the audit differences percentage materiality, we're still using 5%, which is similar to last year. There are also lower materiality applied on some sensitive disclosures, such as remuneration, members' allowances, and related party disclosures. So for these areas, we are using £1,000 instead of the 79,000 that was the usual percentage that we are using. Last area is value for money. So the risk assessment procedures are ongoing for value for money. Although, as noted in the report, one focus area we identified was to check the arrangements in place in relation to financial sustainability. And of course, this has resulted from the economic factors that I mentioned earlier. At this point, I also want to give a brief update on the 21-22 audit. So as Debbie mentioned earlier, the audit started in January. And at this point, we are at 73% in review and completed. There's been constant communication with the finance team to resolve the remaining areas. And we're keeping, so the portal was mentioned earlier, so we are keeping an eye on the portal for any receipt of new information, and my team is still doing that on top of their current commitments in order for us to complete the 21-22 audit much earlier than we did for the 2021. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions?
On page 166, there's a timeline for the completion of the audit, which suggests it will be complete in June, i.e. next month. Is that correct?
So the initial plan really is to complete the audit by June, although this has been slightly derailed by some national issues such as the triennial valuation report. So Debbie mentioned earlier that the triennial valuation report was issued in March 2023, and we had to consider that in our current year audit. So we need to perform additional procedures for that. On top of that, there are some portal requests that we are yet to receive. So the initial plan of June, it has been delayed to September.
And I think September is actually the date of the next committee that's been set. So I think based on discussions with the finance team, we'd be looking to target the September committee to bring an audit results report to. As I said, that will be dependent on the council being able to provide those remaining outstanding queries and the triennial issue that Rachel's referred to, the additional work that we're completing across a Hertfordshire level. So we are doing that via the pension fund auditor. That work has started. We're waiting for that to be completed, and we'll need to feed that in once that's been finalised. But I think we should be on target for September, which is the next committee meeting.
Thank you. Any further questions? No? Okay, then thank you for that. So as previously, members, the recommendation for this item is detailed on page 129 of the agenda pack. This item is just for receiving and so does not require members to vote. Thank you. Now we get on to item number 12. So annual assurance statement and internal audit annual report 2022 and 2023. Simon.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Simon Martin from the Shared Internal Audit Service. This annual report summarises internal audit activity and outcomes for 2022-23, bringing it all together under annual opinions for both financial and non-financial systems. That's shown at page 186 of your pack. There's quite a lot of narrative in the report explaining what internal audit does, how it does that, and why. I hope to elaborate on that at the member training session. That's currently timetabled for September, should that still prove to be agreeable. This report also shows the framework of quality assurance against which internal audit operates, a bit about the public sector internal audit standards with which we conform. There is also content that shows how the service fared against its performance indicators last year and the main service developments that took place. There is an audit charter for 2023-24, which starts at page 197. This document is technical in nature, similar to terms of reference, I guess. It covers the authority and responsibilities for an internal audit service. It's reviewed and approved annually by this committee. Members may like to note when doing that this version is essentially unchanged from last year. Most of the report content is for noting, except for the charter, which members are being asked to accept. There is also a technical requirement for management to confirm or otherwise to the committee that the scope and resources of internal audit were not subject to inappropriate limitations in 2022-23. The Council's Chief Finance Officer traditionally provides that confirmation. Are you happy to do so again, Stephen? I think you need to ask him, Chair. Sorry, beg your pardon.
Yes, no problem. Stephen?
Chairman, I'm delighted to confirm that there were no inappropriate controls or reductions in resources for internal audit during the year in question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other than that, Chair, I'm happy to take any questions, should there be any.
Thank you very much, Simon. Any questions for Simon? No, you've obviously done such a good job. There are 4 recommendations for this item, which are detailed on page 180 of the agenda pack. Stephen, as per 4th recommendation, can you give members assurance that the scope and resources for internal audit were not subject to inappropriate limitations in 22-23?
Yes, Chairman, I can give you that assurance.
Thank you. Members are recommended to note the annual assurance statement and internal audit annual report. Note the results of the self-assessment required by the public sector internal audit standards and the quality assurance and improvements programme. Next point, to accept the SIAS, the Quality Assurance Improvement Programme, sorry, the Sector Internal Audit Standards, Audit Charter for 22, 23, 23 and 24. And final point, to seek management assurance that the scope and resources for internal audit were not subject to inappropriate limitations in 22, 23. Could I have a proposer, please? Certainly, Councillor Walcombe. And a seconder? Certainly, Councillor Nichols. So members, could you raise your hands to indicate whether you are in favour or against? In favour? Unanimous. Thank you. That is carried. So next point, monitoring of 22-23 quarter 4 corporate risk register. Stephen.
Thank you, Chairman. This is the corporate risk register, which contains our corporate risks, which we monitor. And the being corporate risks are those things which we judge are a risk to us not achieving the council's corporate plan. So the risks are here for members. There is each of the grids contains what the risk title is, who the risk owner is, what the trigger will be that will cause that event to happen, so you know it's happening, the consequences of that, and mitigations and controls in place, and then updates, which mostly are as the Q3 position, because very little changed between Q3 and Q4. Obviously, since this was done, which is as at the 31st of March, the World Health Organization has declared the end of the pandemic of COVID, so it's now endemic within the population, and so the risk of that will now be revised back downwards. We have had a consultation from Deluxe on planning fees, which will see a 30-something% increase in planning fees, and then a proposal to index them by a measure of inflation, which will assist with our budget position next year. We're also seeing other changes around in various places around, obviously the risk around political change has in fact indeed occurred, and we're going through the process of that political change within the council. So this is, as I say, as at the 31st of March, so members can see what those risks are and what the mitigations and controls are, and some updates on the current position. So bearing in mind that and the changes that have happened since, I'm quite happy to take any questions or observations from members on the risk register.
Thank you, Stephen. Any questions for Stephen? Go on, David.
It's not a question, it's an observation. I think obviously this is a format of risk register that's been used by the council for some time, and it's well established. I'm certainly not going to come in and start rewriting it. But the one thing I would find helpful is a clearer statement of the risks themselves. Unless I've read this wrong, at the moment all we have is a title for the risk, not an actual statement of the risk. And I think I'd like to ask that to be considered.
Thank you. Stephen?
It's through you, Chairman. By a statement of the risk, so you would, so for example, on risk 1 financial resources, you'd want that to say the council's financial resources are insufficient for it to continue its operations. Can you give me an example of what you mean by a further statement, really?
The traditional meaning of the word risk implies that something may go wrong. There is a risk that something will happen. And there is a risk that there will be financial resources is not a risk. So financial resources is a heading, but it's not a description of the risk that we as a council face. And that's, I think, what we need.
So you don't think that what's described in the trigger column is sufficient? You want to merge the risk title and the triggers together?
No, I wasn't proposing that. I was proposing we have a clear statement of the risk.
Well, I'll take that way and consider it, Chairman.
Yes, certainly. Thank you, Stephen. Councillor Deering.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I've got a question in relation to page 212. or maybe beginning on 211. So the bottom of 211 rolls over to the top of 212. I'd just like an amplification of the comment in relation to risk 7 district plan.
Thank you. Stephen, do you?
Sorry, Chairman, what the
Well, if you start at the bottom of 211,
211, yeah.
paragraph 24, there are no changes to the quarter 4 matrix positions across 13 risks, although there has been updated commentary on 4 corporate risks. Then you list them, and one of them is risk 7 district plan. I'd just like some amplification of that, please.
I think, the Chairman, in relation to the district plan, there's a question from the previous committee as to why the risk had been increased and what the consequences of that were. So I think this is just Sarah Saunders, who's the head of planning and building control, updating the commentary in the district plan part to amplify why she considered that risk had increased. As the exact changes, I would have to call up the previous report. Unfortunately, because we've moved to reporting this through our Pentana performance management system, we aren't able to provide a track changes version, which we previously did. But what I will do, Councillor Deering, if you want, I will take the previous version of it and this version and show you where the track changes are, if that would be acceptable to you.
Thank you very much for that very precise offer. I don't really mind how you do it. I just like some amplification. It may be that you want to take page 229 of the pack into account as well when you come back to me. But I agree, if you could come back, maybe in writing.
Yeah, I mean, it is page 229 that Sarah will have updated, so. Yeah.
So we agreed you'll come back to me.
Yeah, I will come back to you with the difference between page, what the difference is on 229.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions? No takers? So there are two recommendations for this item, which are detailed on page 208 of the agenda pack. Recommendations for Audit and Governance Committee. A, the 22-23 quarter 4 corporate risk register be reviewed and officers advised of any further action that could be taken to manage risk. B, the risks monitored at present are retained for 23-24. So do we have a proposer for this? Thank you, Councillor Nichols. And seconder? Councillor Walcombe, thank you. Members, could you raise your hands to indicate whether you are in favour or against? In favour, for? Unanimous. Thank you very much. That is carried. Item number 14, Audit and Governance Work Programme. It's for you again, Stephen.
Thank you, Chairman. The work programme for the committee is proposed in this report, and also the training requirements are, or suggested training requirements are listed there. I'll be guided by members if they want to change the training arrangements and they feel they want to bring something forward. But it's proposed that we do the role of internal audit at the next committee meeting. There is the potentially the Assets Audit Service who want to bring their external audit planning report for 23-24, but we're hoping to have a meeting with Assets Audit Services this month. Again, there'll be shared internal audit service report, progress reports. There'll be the anti-fraud report, which is looking back at 22-23 from the shared anti-fraud service, plus their progress report. Provisional outturn for 22-23, which will show the financial position when the year end closed, our quarter 1 financial management report, which gives you a forecast to year end, quarter 2 risk management, data protection update from our data protection officer, also assets of community value, it's a requirement that annually the council reviews those assets which have been registered as assets of community value. And Ben Wood, our head of strategy, policy and communications, will bring that report here. The draft annual governance statement, which I referenced earlier, is a rip-roaring 32-page read on the council's governance. And again, the work programme, which will come to the committee again during that meeting. So that's what's proposed for the next meeting on your work programme and training on the role of internal audit.
Thank you, Stephen. Any more comments or questions relating to this? No. Thank you very much. There are two recommendations for this item, which are detailed on page 239 of the agenda pack. Recommendations for Audit and Governance Committee. A, approve the works programme as set out in the report, and B, specify any training requirements. Could I please have a proposer? Thank you, Councillor Nichols. And seconder? Thank you, Councillor Hart. Members, could you raise your hands to indicate whether you are in favour or against? In favour? Unanimous. Thank you very much. That is carried. So next point. Urgent items. The last point. So I understand there are no urgent items. So that concludes tonight's meeting. At what time is it? 20:45. Thank you very much.